Hello and welcome to the Behind the Laughs Comedy Podcast, the show where we go around interviewing different comedians trying to get their view on comedy as well as how they got started in the first place. My name is Andrew, I'm joined by my dad Mike, and today we are going to be interviewing the famous Rene Bray, a comedian of 30 years who has recently retired. She has performed in many famous clubs and has opened for Little Texas, Barry White, The Air Supply, and many, many more.
Hello.
Hey, Rene, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am great. I'm retired. How much better does it get?
I don't know. I guess if you have money, it's great. But if you have no money, I guess retirement could be bad, right?
Well, you know what? Being retired, it doesn't even really matter.
I guess that's
I
right.
found out it costs you absolutely nothing to sit on your couch and watch the TV for hours on end.
I have a feeling you don't do that very much.
More than I thought I would.
So my son, I don't mean to interrupt you. My son Andrew's on the call though as well.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, I'm so glad. Hi, Andrew. I love that kid.
Yeah, you're not alone.
I tell you what, I was so impressed, and trust me, after 30 years, it takes a lot to impress me the way that you did, Andrew.
Oh, thanks
and
so much.
it was. I have comics that have been in the business 5 and 6 years and think they're great comics that are in their 30s that would not have gotten up in front of a crowd that was, let's say, over 50. Okay, let's say way over 50. And I don't know how many were there that night, but I would say it was well over 300. And you stepped up and got on that stage like it was nothing. They loved you. I was impressed.
Thanks. That means so much coming from you. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, because I'm such a joy to be around before the show. I know.
Do you know why I knew you were a great comic?
Why? All
right, Andrew, could you want to tell her the story? That we both knew you were a great comic before you got on stage. Go ahead, because we discussed it afterwards.
Yeah, my dad asked you if you wanted to end the show or if you would rather him do it, and you just said, I don't really care either way. And Dad's like, all right, how long have you been doing comedy for? And you were like, 30 years. And he's like, okay, you're closing the show. You were so humble about it.
Well, you were so humble about it. And the good comics, I'm finding, Rene, are really humble and really, I don't want to say don't care, but really don't care. And I knew that about you right away, just the way you were. You're like, oh, I don't really care. And I knew you didn't care. Not that some comics say I don't care if I close or not, but they do care. They really don't want someone else to close if they think they're a headliner. But you didn't care.
You know, I first of all, that's a huge compliment, and thank you. But it's funny because we were co-headlining, and co-headlining means either person can close. And so I'm always fine either way. And it's funny because a lot of my career, people didn't respect that. I did one show with 2 other women who apparently did not have the internet and did not look me up before we did this. And they were doing about 3 shows a month. And at the time, I was doing probably somewhere around 20 shows a month because I'd looked them up. And they were like, well, you haven't been doing comedy as long as we have. So we're going to put you in the middle, and we're each going to be doing 30 minutes. But if you get in trouble, don't worry about getting off early. And a friend of mine was with me, and they go, why don't you tell them that you're like a road dog? And I go, because it's going to be a lot funnier my way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where they think they think I'm an open micer. That's the way they treated me, like I was somebody who'd done maybe 10 open mics, and I'd already been doing comedy 20 years. I go, don't worry, I'll cover my 20. And I got up there, and afterwards they go, we had no idea. And I go, did you ever look up the people you were working with? or maybe ask a couple of questions. And I just thought, I hope you learned a lesson from that.
Well, in their defense,
but
I didn't look you up either. I don't know if you looked me up.
Well, I hadn't looked you up either because
Okay.
I didn't know. But I, a lot like you, I judge how they come in. If I have a comic come into me and they introduce themselves and then start trying out their act on me.
Oh, my gosh, that's so bad.
Okay, first of all, I have to take the gun out of my mouth because I want to shoot myself immediately. I'm like, really? Can you just wait till somebody's paying for this? Because I don't want to hear it.
Oh, why do comics do
You know?
that? Why do comics do that? Don't they know it's
Because,
obnoxious?
see, here's what I want to tell you. Here's where you're wrong in that statement. They're not comics.
Oh.
They are guys that are doing comedy. Those are guys that do comedy. Real comics come in and sit down in the room, and we are willing to talk to you about anything but comedy. Because just like aren't you a stockbroker or financial guy or something like that?
Yes.
Yes. Do you enjoy on your Sunday afternoon or better yet, when you go into your office for the hour before you start your job, do you enjoy talking about your job? Absolutely not. You want to drink a cup of coffee and you want to relax. That's what a real comedian wants to do before they walk on stage.
How many comics are real comedians then? That'll lead to and I don't have any list of questions or anything. This is going to be free-flowing. So now that you said that, though, you said it in a way that there's not a lot of real comics. Did you mean it that way?
Yes, I absolutely mean it that way. And it's funny because I think I had a great advantage because when I started doing comedy, I knew nothing about it. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. This wasn't a lifelong goal or anything. I just kind of accidentally fell into it. So I knew nothing about the business, but I somehow got addicted after a couple of open mics.
So now that
and the job that I was doing at the time that I prefer not to talk about, but the job that I was doing at the time decided that I could either be a comedian or I could do that job. And my choice was to be a comedian. It just so happened I started doing comedy and open mics in Louisville, Kentucky at a place called the Funny Farm that was owned by Tom Sobel, who in 1988, when I started, was the biggest booker of comedians in the country. There was nobody better. And after doing 8 open mics, I walked into his office and I said, I am now a professional touring comedian.
Wow,
now, at that time, I had not touched a microphone yet because I was scared to touch it because I was so nervous I couldn't hold a microphone and talk at the same time.
Okay, so this leads me into my favorite part is I want to know how it all got started. But first I want to tell you, out of all the comedians Andrew and I perform with in Florida, and it's not thousands because a lot of the shows are small, me, Andrew, and someone else, you were the best comedian I've seen so far since I moved down here 5 years ago. Easily.
Thank you.
We liked you so much. Definitely partly because, you really didn't do any material that night. It was mostly crowd work. And you had like this presence on stage. It was so, I don't really know how to describe it.
Rene, it was so natural that I really felt like I was in your living room. And I know people have told you that, but it didn't seem like anything was pre-planned. Even I know you told me afterwards you did a lot of set material that you usually don't do. I could not believe it. Everything just came so naturally to you. It was amazing. I thought you were amazing.
Oh, thank you. You know what? It was, I guess, the last 2 or 3 years of me doing comedy, it does something to you and I go, I cannot regurgitate the same stuff that I've been doing. But I think the key to being a good comic anyway is regurgitating the same crap you've done 6,000 other times, but making that particular audience think it's the first time you've done it.
That's not easy, Rene. Does that mean, like for me personally, I do tell a lot of the same stories, that I should try to tweak them a little bit and tell them a little differently, or it should be so...
No. If it's a great story and it's written perfectly. See, I now that I've retired, I'm coaching several comics.
I think that's
and one of the things that I tell them this: the one thing that most comedians are scared to death of is they're scared to death of the silence on stage.
That's true. So true.
Okay, and don't be afraid of the silence, because if they're silent and staring at you, they're actually in anticipation of your next words. You have them.
I agree.
That's when you know you have them. So what I say is, if you're getting ready to tell a story that you are now telling for the 6,000th time,
right,
and you start to do it, there's nothing wrong with taking a drink of water or a shot of tequila, as I'm well known for, or maybe 2 shots, and taking a breath like you're thinking of, I don't even know what I was going to say next.
I love that.
You know what you're going to say next. It's been next for the last 6,000 times.
Oh, so you talk about intentionally slowing the story down.
Oh, yeah.
That's an art. That's an art. I don't see a lot of comics do that. I think you're right. They want to get, and sometimes I know when I'm a little nervous, I want to get to the next thing quickly because I know there's some good stuff coming, instead of drawing them in and slowing it down. That's a really good point.
You want to know how you can tell if a joke is great or just okay? When you're doing the joke, you do the setup just like you always would. And then you turn your back to the audience like you're picking up a glass of water or something, and deliver the punchline with your back to the audience.
I love that.
If it still gets an applause break, it's a freaking awesome joke.
And now that I think about it, that's what you did that night. It seems so natural because you did that a few times, like kind of a low voice or a half turn or turned around, which made it seem all the more natural. That's fantastic advice.
Once I decided I wasn't doing comedy anymore, I knew people kept saying, oh, you'll never retire. No, you don't understand. When I tell you I'm done, I'm done. And I knew these were going to be my last shows. The last 6 or 7 months, there's something freeing about knowing that you don't have to worry. If they come up after the show and go, we hated you, go, man, I'm sorry you feel that way. Now pay me because I got to get the hell out of here. There's something freeing about that. There's not that, oh, please love me, love me. I started walking on stage and going, I have no idea what I'm doing tonight. And just free-forming it.
So you're saying...
And whatever I wanted to talk about.
So you're saying you were better in the last 6 months than you've ever been. That's what you just told me.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And
yeah, I think that's right.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I saw you. I couldn't believe you're retiring because, to me, you're on the top of your game. I don't think you could be any better.
Yeah, I quite honestly, I didn't think I could get any better either. And I thought, where do I have to go from here? I'm done.
But
Stick and fork in me. It's time to give my family some time now.
Did you consider just continuing with that same mode, like I'm going to quit next month mode, and just go along like that for a while?
No, I was done. I was done.
Well, I'm so happy I got to see that once. So I love talking about how comics got started, and I want to ask you but I want to ask you, Rene, in a way that I want to know your first memory of comedy. Like I asked Jason, like the very, very beginning, the first show you watched, so your first influence, I don't care how young you were, about comedy.
So as a child, when I was growing up, you'd be outside playing and you'd run in the house, and my mom would be watching either the Merv Griffin show or the Mike Douglas show, and people like Mom's Mabley were on there. And that was my first exposure to comedy.
Okay, so that was a little before my time. So did you sit down and watch that the whole time with your mom? Was that something you were like, hey, this is amazing? Or you just were watching it passing by type thing?
I was just kind of passing the time. If it was raining outside and I couldn't ride my bike,
right. Okay.
You watch that. I do remember watching the Dean Martin show with her. It was on Thursday nights from 10 to 11, and during the summer we were allowed to stay up that late.
Now,
and she would watch that, and there was some comedy. But I didn't sit there thinking I wanted to be a comedian. What happened was, and I'll clean this story out considerably for you. I had a friend that worked at a radio station. He was a morning DJ. And one morning I called in and he and I had a conversation. It was a quick conversation. But I didn't realize when you called a radio station, everything is recorded.
Okay.
So let's say an hour later, I'm driving to drop my kids off at school. And of course, I'm listening to his station. And I hear him say, "Oh my gosh, who is this woman on the phone?" And he plays a little clip of our conversation. And it was, let me just say, you know how Joey Tribbiani on Friends could say, "How you doing?" And it made everything.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. I can pretty much take anything and make it a sexual innuendo and nothing dirty, but riding that fine line.
Yes.
And that's what I had done. And he goes, and then he played that little clip and he goes, "Oh my gosh, who is that? She is the dirty lady." And I called him and I go, "What are you doing?" I'm driving to school and I hear my voice.
With my kids in the car. The dirty lady.
Yeah, my kids are in the car. And of course they're like, "Oh, this is so gross, Mom." And I'm like, and they're like, "How did you do that?" And I go, "That was earlier." And he said to me, he goes, "Look," he goes, "we got a lot of comments. People were calling us going, 'Who is that lady? Who is that lady?'" He goes, "Will you listen to the show every morning and do call-in on anything you hear that you can do that little sexual innuendo thing?" And I go, "Yeah, sure. I haven't got anything better to do with my life. I'll be happy to." So on Friday mornings, the comedians from the Funny Farm, and by the way, I didn't even know there was a comedy club. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know anything about that. But the comedians from the comedy club would come in and do the radio show. And there was a comedian on that morning, and he was complaining because it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and they had driven them past 100 restaurants and wouldn't stop to get anything to eat before they got to the radio station. So I called with some sexually suggestive thing. And when we hung up, the comic said to the DJ, he goes, "Who do you know who she is?" He goes, "I want to meet her." And the comic said, or the DJ said, "Yeah, she's a really good friend of mine." And he goes, I have to meet her." And so he called me and he said, "Hey, we're going to go out to breakfast. Do you want to go out to breakfast?" And I go, "Yeah, I can meet you guys for breakfast." So we all go out to breakfast. And he goes, how do you do that?" And I said, I learned how to do it to overcome being really shy. And he said, "You have got to do stand-up comedy." And I go, "Well, what's that?" And I said, "You mean like Johnny Carson?" Because that's all I knew of stand-ups was maybe the 6 minutes they did on Johnny Carson. And he said, "No, come and see me at the comedy club tonight." And I went to see him that night. And he said, "You've got to do this," because women comedians at that time were either very dirty or very clean. And he said, the fact that you can ride that line, he said, that's a real gift. And I said, "I can't get on stage. I'm not an attorney today," because I almost had a stroke because I couldn't get up in front of people and speak. And he goes, "Oh, no, you've got to do this."
So I love this story. I just love hearing how it all started. How old were you when this happened?
30.
All right.
31.
Wow. Okay, so you're 30 years old. You basically never watched comedy on TV. You never thought about doing any type of stand-up comedy. You just called into this radio station and you get this breakfast. Next thing you know, you're at the comedy club. Is that kind of what happened?
Right. And that night I saw my first comedy show.
Your first comedy show? That's amazing. Now, did you sit in the audience that night?
Oh, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Now,
I sat in the audience.
You didn't perform that first night?
Oh, no, I didn't perform. Are you nuts?
No, well...
No.
Well, Rene, what I want to know is, like, when you were in the audience that night, do you remember, like, watching the comics thinking, wow, I could do this, I want to do this, or I'll never do that? Like, what were your thoughts going through your head at the time? Because now you're a little closer.
Okay. Because I'm watching it, and there were things I noticed between the three different comedians. And I was curious about why did this one do this? Why did that one do that? I guess I was a lot more analytical.
Right.
And I noticed the last guy, who was the guy who wanted to meet me and that I wanted to see, he was a very natural at this. And I go, oh, he seems funnier than the others. And he's wearing a suit and the other guy has on ripped jeans and a T-shirt. Huh, I guess he's the funny one because he's dressed better. So the week he was in town, I got a great education from him about comedy because I was approaching it more analytically. I never dreamed in a million years. That didn't make me want to get up on stage.
Right. So you were just observing at that point. You were just observing what was happening at that point.
Yes. And then the radio DJ says, look, because this comic kept saying to him, you've got to get her on stage. And I go, I'm not going. You can't make me. And you can't. And they said, you've got to try this. So all week long they're saying that. And the radio DJs hosted the open mic night. Now, mind you, this was back in 1988.
Okay.
Open mic night at the Funny Farm. There was no bringer crowd or any of that. They had to turn people away.
Right.
There were 225 audience members sold out.
Wow. That's
there
scary.
There were 21 to 25 open micers every Tuesday night at the Funny Farm.
Wow. It was 5 minutes each, something like that?
5 minutes each.
Okay.
So the DJ says to me, please, just come out to open mic with me. And I'm like, I got 3 kids at home. I don't leave them unless I'm working. And he goes, you got to see what open mic is about, and then you got to try this. So I went to the first open mic, and some of them were great, and then some of them, well, sucked.
So you didn't perform at the first open mic?
Yeah, they were pretty bad. And he goes, you're funnier than most of the people here. Sit down and write out an act. Well, it took me going to about 4 open mics, and I finally sat down, and I said, I'm going to write some material and see if I can do it. Well, let me tell you, I lost about 5 pounds because I threw up for the 3 days prior to this, right?
Now, hold on a second. People think you're exaggerating about that, but I want people to realize how stressful that is. Did you really throw up that many times?
Oh, I had to call in sick to work one day. It was 2 days before I was going to do this. I couldn't sleep at night.
Unbelievable.
I couldn't eat anything.
I love it.
I would take a drink of coffee. It was coming right back up.
Why are you doing it?
I had a butterfly colony living in my colon.
So why are you doing it? Because they forced you to do it? So it's making you sick, but why are you doing it?
Oh, well, who knows why you do it? Why do you shoot up heroin?
I guess you're right. Who knows why you do it, right?
To me, comedy is my heroin. That's what it turned out to be.
Well, not that
because
it wasn't.
I got on stage that first night,
right.
And you're going to ask me, what joke did you do? Who knows?
Who knows? No.
Who frickin' knows? I can't remember. I didn't touch the microphone. I forgot to shake the guy's hand like you're supposed to. I was just so... did they laugh? I don't know. I was just so glad when the thing was done. And I go, now I've done this, and I don't ever have to do it again. And they go, oh, my God, that was awesome. And Tom Sobel came up to me, and he goes, I can't wait to see you next Tuesday. By the way, well, first of all, anybody that knows Tom Sobel, he goes, oh, you were very funny. I'll see you next week. Everybody who works for Sobel has a Sobel impression. So he said we do a workshop, and the great thing about being in Louisville was the headliner from the week would come in on Tuesday before open mic, and they did like an hour-and-a-half workshop with the comic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
and I learned so much watching them. And I go, well, I didn't write anything new. And he goes, just do what you did last week. And the following week, they give you a video of the show you did the week before. They're taping all of it, and then they give you your individual video.
Right.
And I go, oh, okay, well, let me see if I can remember this, and I'm going to do it again. at the end of 8 open mics, my job gave me the ultimatum. And in one of those workshops, somebody had said to one of the comedians, what's the difference between an amateur and a professional? And he said, an amateur still keeps their day job and a professional doesn't have any employment. And also, all of the comics said, if Tom Sobel thinks you're funny, you're going to be successful.
Really? Wow.
And I go, well, Tom told me I was funny. I don't have a day job. And I literally walked upstairs because his office, the Sobel Enterprises, was in the upstairs of the Funny Farm. I walked in and I go, I am now a professional touring comedian.
So you quit your job after being on stage 4 times? Did I get that right?
Eight times. So I did 8 open mics.
So 8 weeks later, you quit your job and you say, I'm going to be a professional comedian.
Well, let's make this clear. Quitting is on my side. My employer may have a different story about it.
You're no longer employed after 8 weeks. Is that fair to say?
His story was, he told me I could either do stand-up comedy or I could do my job. And I said, I can't stop this now. I was hooked.
Yeah. So how do you get hooked into 8 weeks? So you're the first time on stage, you don't even remember. You're terrified. You're nervous. You're throwing up. 8 weeks later, you're ready to commit to it. That seems very quick to me. Like, what happened?
You know, that's the sick part inside of you.
Yeah.
At least it was the sick part inside of me that for the first time in my life, people liked me for just being me.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I go, oh my God, I didn't have to do anything special. It was the first time I ever felt comfortable in my own skin.
That's fascinating, actually. So you felt like you were you for the first time.
Yeah.
That's really unbelievable. What during the 8 weeks of open mic, did you build confidence and have some laughs, or you don't even remember any of that? Did you build some confidence there?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I recently went back. I still have all those videos.
Oh, interesting.
And it's funny to look at my first, because what I thought was 5 minutes was really 3 minutes. and I looked like I was ready to run off a stage at any second, which I was. Trust me. But it was a really good set.
It was. It was funny for
now,
3 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
And the one that got me was my third open mic, because I did exactly the same thing I'd done through the first open mic and the second open mic, without the same results. Now, I don't know what happened. That's when you walk off stage, which I've done many times since then, and gone, this crap was funny last week. What happened tonight?
Yeah.
What? And I said to my friend, because the radio DJ, he's still MC, and I go, well, I thought I was going to be good at this, and I'm not. And he goes, no, you have ups and downs. And he goes, talk to the other guys about this. And so the other guy, I go, it was really horrible. And they go, did you learn anything from it? And I said, well, the only thing I think I did different this time was I think I talked faster. And they go, so you learned something. And I learned, now this is my third week of doing open mic, the thing I learned was, you don't learn from the shows where they're laughing. You learn from the ones where they're staring at you like you just crawled out from under a rock.
I couldn't agree with you more. Those crowds that laugh at everything, I love them, and I wish it was all like that. But you really don't learn anything there. You learn when it's a tough crowd. You got to work.
When you suck, you go back to your house or your hotel room and you go, I can't ever let that happen again. What can I do to fix that?
Or you could say, I'm going to quit the comedy business.
Yeah, well, see, I thought if you had a bad show, they wouldn't let you do it anymore. And they go, no. Oh, no, there wouldn't be any comedians in the world if we did that.
So if this...
So,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
The funny thing with Sobel was, and this is to make a very long story even longer, the beauty of this is Sobel looks at me and he goes, oh, you can't make a living doing comedy yet. I said, yeah, but you said I was funny. And all these guys said, if you said I was funny, I could do it. And he goes, oh, well, I'm going to put you to work here in the office. He goes, I was divorced with 3 kids. And he goes, oh, you can do some work here in the office, and I'll put you out as MCing on the weekends. And I go, MCing, now that's the first guy, right? And he goes, yeah, you're going to be the first guy. I had the advantage of working in the biggest comedy booking office in the country and working in the office. And the first thing I learned was everybody calls in and tells you how great they are.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And how funny they are. And if they say they're a feature, they're really an MC.
Yep.
And if they said they were a headliner, they were really a feature.
A feature, that's right. So,
and they always tell you I'm a hilarious headliner.
See, I would never say that, because then you bomb that night. It's like you set yourself up for disappointment when you do that.
Do you know the first time I called Coconuts, and everybody always said Coconuts was the lowest one on the food chain, and I go, let me go there. And this is after probably doing comedy for 2 years. I called in and I said, hi, my name's Rene Bray. I'm a comedian out of Louisville. I said, I've been doing comedy a couple of years, and I'm wanting to book some gigs. And she said, what spot are you in? And I said, well, she goes, well, how much time do you have? And I said, if they're laughing, I have about 35 minutes. If they're not, I'm like at 20. And she said, well, she goes, well, how often are they laughing?
Good
and
question.
I said, I usually do pretty good. And she said, well, we're going to put you in the feature slot. And I go, well, if you're sure, but I said, I don't want to upset you because, And she goes, no. And we're going to put you here at the home club so we can see you. And I go, okay.
See you.
And I featured for them one time, and they made me a headliner.
Humble.
Wow.
See, I knew that about you. You were humble then. You were humble when I met you. So 2 things I wanted to just ask you. First is, if it wasn't for the radio show guy, you would have never done stand-up comedy. Is that right?
That's correct. You know what I want to say to that? No, I would never have done stand-up comedy. I would still be retired today with a 401k and some kind of big retirement plan. That's where I would have been.
You might have had a different life, and you might have had more money, but you certainly would not have done stand-up comedy if it wasn't for that DJ.
No. I would have had a real job and a real life, and maybe a husband, and
So,
Now,
what about when you started hosting that other show, which I think is a great spot for a new beginner, by the way. I'm a big fan of hosting to learn.
See, that's the problem. That's why we don't have really, really great comics anymore, because nobody wants to host.
I agree.
And they think if you ask a comic to host now, they act like you're insulting them.
I agree.
If I had my choice, I would host every show all the time. That's where you get good.
Well, we ran a comedy company in New York, my friend and I, for 5 years, and finding a good host was impossible, so I started hosting every show, and it's hard. Hosting is hard, but it gets you better because you have to interact with the audience. There's just a lot more there. So when you were hosting, how many, was it every weekend for like 2 years? How was the consistency of work then?
Well, first of all, the beauty of being in Louisville, too, gave me this advantage. You are within a 2-hour drive of Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Lexington, and Indianapolis, and Louisville, and they all had open mic nights on different nights. I literally did open mic night every night of the week in a different city.
Oh, you were all in.
Because we would go to different ones.
You were all. What were they paying you to host back then?
More than they paid me to headline now.
Seriously?
Let me tell you, when I was hosting, I made more money than I make to headline clubs now.
Wow, that was a time.
Yeah.
I never heard anyone say that. I just did. Jason Douglas on the other podcast that he hosted for free for 2 years. You heard that, right?
Right.
but I guess
I heard that, and we hosted a lot for free. We traveled doing all these open mics, and they were for free. But is it really for free? I considered that my comedy college.
Absolutely. So you were working every night. Now, when you hosted, how much time were you doing up front?
5 to 7 minutes.
Now,
and the intros.
Now, I find when I host, I find it very difficult to do material. I feel like if I just talk to people, it's usually better. What would you advise people when they're hosting in terms of some hosts just jump into material and it just seems off?
Well, it is off because I say to other comics that I've worked with, and what I like to do when I'm hosting is, look, this is like you've invited a bunch of people into your living room.
Exactly.
So if you just jump up and start telling jokes, they're like, what's going on?
Yes. Yeah.
Take it easy. But see, the egos get the better of them, and they're so anxious to get the material out there that they don't get the show started right. I've told comics all along, until that MC work is done, the comedy show doesn't start. And that means if the MC doesn't do it, the feature has to start their set with all of that. And if they haven't done it, and as a headliner, I would go up and go, hey, guys, how's everybody doing? It's great to be here at the comedy club, blah, 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 blah. But it's also why when I started the corporate stuff and you're working on your own, I wasn't afraid of that. I have comics that I go, I've got a corporate gig for you, because I'm booking some shows, because I have clients that I've done their shows 5 years in a row. And they're like, what do you mean you're not coming this year?
Yeah.
And I go, well, what I mean is you don't have enough money to get me on my couch anymore, you know? I'm not putting on underwear and makeup to go anywhere, you know?
Well,
I am your Walmart shopper now. That's all. I'm not leaving the house. And I said, but I can get you somebody. And let me pick somebody that's good for you. But I'll call some comics and they'll go, what do you mean you did the show all by yourself? Well, what about an MC? It's a corporate show. It's 45 minutes. Just go up there and do. But they haven't MC'd for so long and they're not comfortable with it. Get comfortable with whatever they give you.
Tell me, now that you're teaching, which I think you are a natural teacher, what is the most cringeworthy things that comics do when you see them on stage? You're like, oh no, don't do that. Like, what's cringeworthy that you're watching now? I know there's more
comics
than one.
Yeah, I'm like, let me pick out of one of the top 100. Comics who think they're great at crowd work. Crowd work is a knack and a gift. Most comics shouldn't do it. Most comedy clubs aren't paying you to do it. They want you to do material. And I watch them do it. And the other thing is they see a headliner that does something and that it works for that headliner and they go, I'm going to implement that. And they do it the next week and it's really bad. Really bad. For example, one of the things I'm notorious for, and there are many club owners that hate me for it, but it works for me, is if I have a very small crowd and I don't feel like they're close to me, I would put the mic down and either step off the stage or sit on the edge of the stage.
It's funny. I do the same thing, Renee. It's funny you say. I will never put the mic down, though, because I feel like I need them to pay attention. But I get off the stage a lot and go closer.
Let me tell you, put the mic down once. I mean, if it's, you got 35 people in the room and there's nobody in the back. Now, even sometimes if they're in the back, I will put it down and they'll go, we can't hear you. I'll go, then come up here.
Oh, yeah, you want it to, it's got to be intimate, right? It has to be intimate.
It has to be intimate. And most of the time, if they're in the back and at the bar, they weren't paying attention to the show anyway. They were probably part of the problem.
Oh, that's
so
weird.
I'll sit down on the edge of the stage and slow the show down a whole lot, and I've seen guys go, I'm going to do that. And I'll go, yeah, I want to see you do it. I had to suck a lot of times at this before it started to work for me. And most guys don't want to put in the suckage.
Well, Renee, slowing the show down is counterintuitive. Like when I'm not doing well, I know I need to slow down and re-engage, but I'll tend to speed up if I didn't have a lot of experience. So sitting on the stage and putting the microphone down, people are afraid. They're afraid to slow it down. That's what it is.
Yeah,
they don't want it any
see,
slower.
I didn't know anything about this business getting into it. That was the beauty. Had I known then what I know now, I would have still been at my old job making a pension.
What's the largest crowd you ever performed in front of? What's the biggest gig you ever did?
8 to 10,000 people.
Wow.
It was yeah. I opened up a concert for the Red Hot Chili Peppers in South Carolina.
How much time did you?
And 20 minutes.
Did they listen to you?
And sort of. I yelled a couple of profanities at them, and they started to slow down. And what I finally said was, you have to pay attention to me. I am the babysitter on this trip for these guys, because I didn't even know who the Red Hot Chili Peppers were. And I was in a lot of agony anyway, because I was an idiot at the time. I lived in Savannah, Georgia. And before I drove up to Columbia, South Carolina to do this show, I worked out at the gym. And I mean, at that time, I was a monster at the gym. And then I got in my car and drove like 5.5 hours. And then when I went to get out of the car, I could not hardly move my legs without excruciating pain. And every time I drew a breath, it felt like somebody was sticking a knife into my stomach. Ooh. And you have to walk up the steps to the stage. And I looked at those steps and I went, oh, why tonight? Why did anybody think tonight was a good night for steps? I can't even feel my leg. So I thought, I don't care whether they listen or not, but you do care. So I just said, hey, shut up until you listen to the babysitter. I'm not bringing the boys out. Then you get them to be quiet.
So your career spanned 30 plus years, Rene?
30 years exactly. I started in June and I ended in June.
What was your level of nervousness ordinarily before you had to perform at a decent venue with 200 or 300 people? Because when I met you that night, it seemed like you were at a zero, and I envy that. I'm never at a zero.
I will tell you, I think I'm always at a zero. This is after probably the first 5 years. It became for me, I had to program into my mind, I'm coming to make the donuts. That's all this is. These people are not coming to my family reunion. I know this stuff works. I know how to fix it if it doesn't. That's what I'm comfortable with. People say, how do you get comfortable? Because I know how the show is going to turn out. It's going to be okay no matter what happens, because we can turn things around.
So, all the comics I've interviewed so far, nobody's been at a zero. They said there are times they're low, but when I met you, I had a feeling you were always at a zero. How can I get to a zero?
Well, some of it is fake it till you make it, because if you saw me in real life, come spend the day with me. I'm not ever at a zero. I have anxiety going. I went to Costco today. My heart was racing and I was sweating walking through the door.
Why?
Things like this. This whole mask thing makes me nervous.
Okay.
Because I'm always afraid my mask will fall down and somebody will see it and they'll go, "Hey, why aren't you wearing your mask?" And the other thing is, sometimes, like with the sinus stuff and the allergies, you'll cough or your sneeze. I'm afraid to death now to cough or sneeze in public. I'm afraid they'll whisk me off to some isolated place for 2 weeks, because I got allergies. So I'm a nervous wreck going into the store. I was literally sweating. My son was with me, and I'm like, look, here's our grocery list. We got to hit these 5 aisles. Let's get in and get out. And he's like, holy crap, Mom. It's Costco. And I'm like, yeah, let's just get out of here and go home.
But how can I be a zero on stage, though? Like, I don't know how can you trick yourself into saying I don't care what happens when I do? I want everyone to have a good time. I could get over it if I bomb. I bombed. It's fine. But no one had a good time then. I want everyone to have a great time. So there's always a level of anxiety for me.
Well, part of it is I used to do a lot of visualization, and that is I would spend the afternoons, because remember, most of the time I was in hotels. I was a road dog for most of those years.
Okay.
So I would go to, after laying out in the sun all day at the pool, which I was famous for, I would go into my room and I would visualize the show going very well. I'd go, the show is going to go well. And then I would go, this isn't some big special thing. See, we as comics go, ooh, we're comedians. Comedy's a special thing. This is wonderful, blah, blah, blah. No, forget about it. When they say your name, you are hitting the time clock and you're going in to make the donut. And when you can make your mind and body think that, so I'm just going in to do my job. Now, your job is to make sure everybody has a good time, but you visualize that during the day. Everybody is going to have a good time. And you know that you've come with your toolbox. Just like when you call a plumber to come to your house, and you've tried everything on this. You've got a stopped-up drain, and you've tried everything, and the water's not moving through it. You don't see the plumber get out of the truck and go, oh, my God, how's this going to go? I wonder how this is going to work. No. He comes in with his toolbox. He's got everything in that box that will some way, somehow make that water go down that drain. And he keeps trying different things till it works. When you know as a comedian you're walking on stage with all the tools to make it work, you're not nervous anymore because you're just the plumber walking in the door. You're just the guy coming in to bake the donut.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us, Rene. We really appreciate this. This has been really interesting, and thank you to those who are listening. And make sure you tune in next week for when we upload part 2 of this episode. Thank you and good night.